Looks like it is not out there yet. So we'll see what's going on. Oh, we got some votes going on. Let's see what wins. This is not going to take long. We'll just allow for another minute or so here and figure it out. It looks like tips and tricks for running traps and hazards is running away with it right now. Really running away with it. I don't think anything else will recover. Adam's favorite 80s cartoons, my threat about it taking longer than 3 minutes has done the trick. I have suppressed voter initiative, and people are not going to vote it up. It doesn't look like. All right, we're going to go with tips and tricks for running traps and hazards. So that one sounds fun. All right, where to start with this one? So this is very clearly already a D&D and tabletop role-playing topic, so I don't have to do anything to try to relate it back to that. So that makes my job a little bit easier here. But I would say that the biggest tip or trick or advice that I would provide for running traps and hazards is to think of them more like a monster combat challenge, in the sense that typically traps in most of the games that I've played in and that I've seen people try to run, they are treated as almost like a something that we're going to wave our hand and get through, relatively easily, or they are treated as a gotcha by the DM, where they, are using passive perception and all of those kind of things to essentially just steal resources from the party. And that sounds very negative the way that I'm saying that, but ultimately what I'm getting at is traps in most of the games that I've played in or seen are not very dynamic, and they're not very engaging for the players, because again, it is either that player is saying, I search for traps every 5 feet that they're walking in a dungeon. I remember this especially in third edition. Every single rogue that I ever played with, maybe I just had DMs that constantly wanted to be vindictive with the traps, but the rogues were constantly, I search 5 feet ahead. I search 5 feet ahead. And it was something that in our games really slowed the game down quite a bit. I don't see quite as much of the search every 5 foot square type of approach with fifth edition, but I do see it to where with passive perception or whatever else, it's typically a thing where if your passive perception or investigation is high enough, then you just automatically know a trap's there right out of hand, and you're able to circumvent that trap fairly easily, or at least with the skills that your character has. You can, it's kind of like just waving your hand, and the trap might as well have not been there. And then I would say that the opposite of that is, if the party doesn't have a high enough passive perception or investigation, then it just becomes something that seems very unfun to the players, because, hey, I just walked through a door and I took 30 points of damage. This is just to try to make this other monster encounter more difficult. And so, saying all of that, I'm not saying that I don't like traps or hazards, because I actually like them quite a bit, but I prefer to use them more in a way that they're not like an appetizer for that eventual monster encounter to make the party expend their resources. They're more like that monster encounter itself, where the idea is, sure, they're expending resources, but it's a dynamic, complex thing. So I'm a big fan of skill challenges from fourth edition. I think that they weren't implemented quite as well as maybe they needed to be, but the idea and the concept was very fascinating to me, and I use that quite a bit. So I use versions of that with fifth edition too. And actually, one of the things that informs the way that I use that for fifth edition D&D is borrowing from other game systems out there. So I strongly encourage anyone who is a dungeon master to research other game systems, play other game systems, because even if D&D is your only the only game in town for you, those other game systems have quite a bit that they can lend to improving that fifth edition experience. And Cortex is actually one of those systems that has helped me, figure out how to run traps or hazards even more effectively, because Cortex has something, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about Cortex in the coming months. But Cortex has something essentially that's called a test, which is going to be very equivalent to just a skill check in Dungeons and Dragons. But then they also have contests, which are like contests in Dungeons and Dragons, which are typically opposed skill checks. In Cortex, those become escalating skill checks. So it's essentially like once you enter a contest, you are trying to beat the number of the challenge that you're going against right there. And essentially it comes down to whoever can't beat that number, or whoever just kind of stops trying to beat that other number. And so that escalation is really interesting, and I end up using that sometimes in D&D encounters as well. But then finally, there's a third type of challenge in Cortex that is just a challenge, and that challenge is where you are essentially fighting almost like a dice pool in Cortex, but it's kind of the equivalent of like a monster in D&D, where a monster in D&D has hit points. It's essentially the same kind of concept, that a monster maybe has different, or a trap maybe has different aspects to it. So the lever mechanism, the thing that is shooting the darts out of the wall, the thing that is making the floor turn into lava or whatever, those are different kinds of elements of that complex trap. And so then again, this is getting very close to, Xanathar's, what they're trying to do there as well. So taking those kind of concepts and treating it like the party is trying to overcome the trap in the same way that they're trying to wear down hit points for a monster. And to me, that makes it far, far more engaging. It's not just a binary, you found it and you get through it very easily, or you don't find it and you take damage kind of situation. So that's what I would recommend is, in my games, I never include traps that are just those binary type events. It is always something that is more like an obstacle. And I wish that I could think of back when Dungeon Magazine was around in third edition, there was an adventure that was taking place in a monastery, and it was like the Way of the Three Winds or something. I'm not remembering it, the title of it properly, but the entire dungeon was complex type traps that you're overcoming instead of just monsters that you're overcoming. And that is going to be the angle that I typically take with traps or hazards in my games. So another way to think about this, and this is something that Cortex would do, if you are battling a kaiju in a city that you're in, thinking about like what are the different touch points and places that you could possibly engage with this titanic creature, where maybe you can't take out the Tarrasque directly because you're not 20th level, an entire party of 20th level characters, but maybe the Tarrasque can still be a part of your game. But then the destruction it's causing and the property around it, that's a hazard. And there could be these different touch points that, if players go into this building, if they're on the lower level, this is the kind of interaction they can have. If they're on the mid level, this is another kind of interaction. If they're on the roof of that building, what would they be doing here? Are they jumping onto it? Are they trying to plant something onto it? Whatever. So coming up with possibilities like that, and then letting those be almost standalone challenges or standalone, again, treating them a little bit more like monsters. I think that that makes it far more dynamic for the players. One of these days, maybe I can run some kind of encounter that is mostly traps and hazards, and then it's probably going to hit home a lot more of what I'm saying there. But yeah, that's the advice that I would offer on that: is don't make them binary events, make them something far more complex and dynamic and engaging for the players. All right, we will move on now to questions. Let's see. All right, we've got several questions coming in. All right, let's see. Come back here. All right, am I good, Will? Okay, so I need to switch over though, I think, right? We're doing this a little differently today, so I'm trying to figure this out. Oh, here we go. All right, I think I got it. Wait, what happened? There we go. Okay. Ooh, is it working? Yes, it's working. So this is from Matt Stumpy. Can we get some simple, quick video did you know guides on how to use the various parts of D&D Beyond toolset? The group I'm a member of are a bit technophobes and need a bit of help. I'm sure they're not the only ones. Yes, very sympathetic to this. I have played with many groups that are potentially a little technophobic. And yes, we have wanted to do this for some time. It comes down to a resource issue, but it is something that we are trying to do more and more of. I know that we have on social media in the last few months started doing a little bit more of at least just quick tips that are kind of low hanging fruit, and trying to make it to where that would help somewhat. But some more in-depth guides are things that we would love to do. We have not done it for things like our homebrew system at this point in time, because we know that that homebrew system is going to change at some point in the future. But as some of these tools start to mature and they get in places where we are pretty confident in where they are, video tutorials are things that are certainly on the list and things that we want to be able to do. Aaron Lore is it time for me to be let go as a moderator of D&D? Oh no, that's not what that says. It's that time of the month again. How goes dark mode development? It is not going fast enough for everyone who's hungry for it out there, is what we will say. Rogue Goat, or no, Rouge Goat. Is that Rouge? Rouge Goat, yes. Does the new non-core D&D labeling mean that third-party compatible materials like the Astrolago press books? I don't know what Astrolago press is. I'm going to have to look that up, though. Could be available on D&D Beyond. Unfortunately, I have no news about that at this point in time. It's something that I have wanted to do for a very long time, and we have not been able to make headway with making that happen, with all of the I's that have to be dotted and the T's that have to be crossed. So unfortunately, nothing. Matt Stumpy, what was the waiting music in the stream? I'm going to let someone else answer that one, hopefully in chat somewhere. But I don't know exactly what it is, but I think that we can get you a link to what it was. But I'm a fan of it. GK Smith LCW, will DDB be selling Adventures League content like other digital platforms? Is there a timeline on when that might happen? We do intend to sell it at some point, but there is no timeline. Draven Desden, you find a ring of 3 wishes. What is the first wish you make? That is interesting because, people most of the time ask what is the third wish you would make. and that is like freeing the genie every time, right? Because it's kind of like, all the movies of our youth, or at least my youth, taught you that if you didn't use that third wish to like end the servitude of the genie, then you were like kind of a terrible person. And so either way, that third wish is reserved, right? It's just right out of the gate reserved. The first wish, it really depends on. I mean, if this was D&D wishing, where there was a dungeon master on the other side of it trying to corrupt whatever you were saying to make it more challenging for you, I've had a bad experience. Um, if that was the case, I would probably choose something different. But if this was real, like wishes without all those strings attached and everything else, then there is no question in my mind that I would vote, vote, that I would wish that everyone in the world could love each other. And then I think everything, all our problems would go away if that just happened. So that would be my first wish, no question. But then if I did that in a D&D game, there's no telling what kind of like twistedness would happen wishing that. So in a D&D game, the wish would probably be, whatever the most major threat that I perceived as a character in the world, would you know uh, go away in some way. And I would try to do that in the most good hearted way that I could. Tiamat would be bound forever in the nine hells instead of, coming out, or, that kind of thing. But yeah, if it was the real world, for everyone to love each other. All right, Rad Zombie 3. When he gives the code for the legendary bundle, where do you actually enter that to try to get it? So you enter it into the chat, exclamation point, and then you're going to go with, exclamation point, whatever the word is, and then Moobot will pick that up and enter you to win. Lynn Carius, with Wizards of the Coast updating certain races, how would you rewrite orcs and drow? That's interesting. I think that, for the most part, and again, this is not any insider information about exactly how Wizards of the Coast is going to be doing this, because I can honestly say we haven't seen the mechanics behind what they're doing here. So I think that it is two different elements. There's a mechanical element because this is a game, and then there is a lore or story oriented element to all of this. And so the mechanical element, I think, is very much so within the realm of possibility to just simply remove ability score increases and those kinds of things from races, and potentially either package those as a flexible option similar to variant humans in the player's handbook, or to potentially create ability, or attach ability score increases to classes instead of races. So I think that I've seen a lot of different kinds of solutions out there. I think mechanically you've got to do something to address all of that. And I think that being able to have the flexibility and the idea that humanoid sentient races can operate on an even playing field and an equal playing field is a very, very good direction. It remains to be seen exactly how Wizards of the Coast will handle that aspect of it. I think the more important part of this is the lore and story based considerations. And I think that the only thing that you can do with that is, first of all, acknowledge that there are problems, which Wizards of the Coast has done that recently, and that is a great first step. And then start to write in improvements, and start to it's going to be like chipping away at a diamond in some ways, but still, I would rather be out there punching the ocean, for a good direction and a good cause, than to do nothing at all. So I think it's going to take time for all of that to get in a better place. But I think that you just simply start with new books, new supplements, starting to focus a little less on the fact that Drow society is evil, maybe, and more on the fact that certain members of that society are possessed or tainted by thoroughly evil goddess that is the personification of the idea of evil. And so again, it doesn't mean that that entire culture or race is evil. And so I think that taking those kinds of steps in the new products that are coming out in the future, it's going to take some time, but over time, those sentiments are going to start to change, and we're going to end up in a better place. So, my main takeaway from everything that's happening is I'm just glad that the discussions are actually happening, that the problems are being recognized, and it doesn't necessarily make the solutions easy or something that can quickly happen, but it is much, much better than the ignorance or acting like these problems haven't existed for the decades and centuries that they have. And so I think I think we're on the right path. I hope that we can accelerate down that path more in the future. But being on the right path is a good starting place. Acadic, maybe. Probably butchered that one. Sorry. Was the issue with the Riot Games partnership due to do with their negative reputation in regards to various social issues? The issue with the Riot Games partnership and the reason that that content is being archived on August 10th is purely our responsibility. We accept full responsibility of what happened in this situation. There was misalignment between the various partners that were involved here. Riot Games did not ask us to remove that content at all, and no, it was definitely not in regards to any other aspects of anything that was going on with Riot. It was just unfortunately, something that we missed along the process, that we had to end up taking that down. I do hope that we can do other types of partnership like that in the future, and we're going to just see how that goes in the future. And we learned a lot through the process that hopefully will help that be more successful in the future. Rouge Goat. Are there any plans to integrate the Heroic Chronicle, both Sword Coast and Wild Mount versions, into the base character creator tool? That's an example of the rules gaps or rules debt that I have talked about even today, as something that we want to be able to address in the future. And so that is one example of something that would be on that list. I don't have an ETA for that, of course, and that particular aspect of character creation is not at the top of the list, but it is on the list, and it's something that we would want to supply at some point in the future. Devere P. I can't seem to add different second level spells to my character. If I change the name, every scroll I add stacks with it. Yeah, that sounds like a bug, if that is actually happening. And I would, advise you to contact support or possibly, go to the forums and see if anyone else has had an issue like that. And we'll have to probably get some more information from you to figure out exactly what's going on. That's not something that I've heard as a widespread issue. So it's probably something, idiosyncratic to your character or to, the spells that you're choosing, or who knows. We would have to dig into that a little bit more, but definitely unintended if it's doing that. And please reach out to support, and we'll try to help you. Big hearted guy. Will dice rolling be added to tables in the source books, such as treasure tables in the DMG? Yes, that is definitely on the list, and we would love to do that. Ed VMS, are there plans to fix the Domain of Life Cleric's Disciple of Life feature on the character sheet? Um, so to kind of clarify here, for us, this isn't a fix because it's something we haven't even done in the first place. So we're not fixing anything, but it is an example of what I was talking about with rules, debt, and some of the gaps that and now that one has been there from the beginning. And it's one of those exceptions to normal rules that we just haven't had the bandwidth to implement yet. But I can tell you that that one in particular is very close, if not at the top of the list. So that is something that as we start to tackle those quality of life updates, the Disciple of Life feature, I know has been widely discussed internally, and it's something that we want to provide an improvement, especially given the fact that um, the life domain cleric is the most played subclass on D&D Beyond. So that does impact our decisions for prioritization, and so that is very close, if not at the top of the list. Ailwin, had to like change my hand orientation there, like a blood circulation was struggling. Have you seen art velocity increase over the last year based on the big hiring spree? PI increment over increment. Um, Yeah, I mean, we're definitely still working through some growing pains. Very transparently, when you go from 4 developers to 30 plus developers, it is a struggle as any company has tried to do this. I've seen this in the past in my career, and it doesn't translate to, hey, you go from 4 people to 32 people. Well, that's going to be, if I'm doing the math right, that's going to be 8 times the output. It's just not the way that it works. We have an incredible team of developers, all of the teams that we have working on DDB, incredibly talented. They really put their heart and soul into what's going on. And I know that they are committed, and we're committed across the board with the leadership of D&D Beyond to get to a point where we're going to see that velocity, start to increase. And so that is something that we're going to continue to work through those growing pains, and I think that we are headed in a really, really good direction with that, and especially getting done with a huge undertaking like the character framework service upgrades that we had to do. We're getting into a little bit more of greenfield territory that it's going to help us be able to deliver some things that are more exciting for the team and for the fans out there. D&D Dadoff 2. Will the encounter builder allow for monster or NPC rolls like when using dice rolls from character sheets? As a DM who uses electronic tools, it would be helpful to be able to roll from the same interface with the proper modifiers already installed. So yes, that is something that I was sharing earlier in the update here, that we are looking at ways to integrate dice rolling into the combat tracker. So that's something that we'll share more when we have more details. Alt F4 will help. If you could have played in one of the D&D Live 2020 games, which one would you have liked to play in? Um, that's that's a little bit of a tough one. Probably Deborah Ann Walls, though, because I'm a big fan of hers. She's incredible, but then also a big Amy Acker fan. She's been in a whole lot of shows that I care a great deal about, includes to have not seen that one before. I think for some strange reason that show got a little bit of like bad buzz like right at the beginning of it, for the first 3 episodes or so, and it does take it a little while to get started. But by the time you get into the back half of that first season of that show, it really becomes a master class in having a meta plot where there is this overarching plot that is playing out over several seasons and several episodes, while also sticking with the procedural format of case of the week type thing, within each individual episode. So it's a fantastic show. Amy's in that in a big way. So I think that I probably would have liked to be in that one, probably the most. Of course, I think that there was a lot of fun with the Game of Thrones cast for sure, but Deborah's game probably still would have edged that out. Amand Lynn. Let's see how much time we got. Oh man, I'm flying through these. Great. Got 12 minutes left. Haven't seen any announcements past the initial hype, but will there be a discount code for those that pre-order Icewind through their local partnered game stores like there was with Theros? We don't have anything in place like that at this point in time anyway. We are always going to be looking for ways that we can super serve the fans out there, and that is one thing that I think is a really, really great thing that we were able to do with Theros. And so we're going to continue to look for ways to do things like it in the future, but we do not currently have anything like that in place for Icewind Dale. Aylwin again. I bought the Legendary Bundle in March 2018. I would like to get all the other books that I have that have come out since. Any way to make that purchase easier than one by one? Yeah, I think I think that is a really, really good suggestion, and it is something that we've discussed, and something that we can look into a little bit more. I think that we see with a lot of the data for Legendary Bundle purchasers, they are there's a very high percentage that buy those books almost immediately when they come out. But I do know that some fans take breaks, they step away, they come back, and so I do think that bundling that remaining content is a good idea, and we'll certainly look into that more. Matt Stumpy, when will the combat tracker be available to non-subscribers? When we get it to a point where the current plan, and this could change, but the current plan is when we get it to a point where we think it's worth actually showing off, because it's in a very unfinished state at this point. So I think that once we're able to integrate character statistics fully into the combat tracker, and things like digital dice and all of that, where it's a little more complete, that's when that transition to public beta would occur. But we'll keep you posted. Let's see. Saber Runner. Encounters of the week with attached encounters for the combat tracker. I think that's a very, very good idea, and something that we have been talking about, and something that we're going to, be getting James to integrate as we go forward, where you can use that copy functionality to pull that right into your account. You see, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not adding duplicate questions here. Okay. Cistern, aka Rindalathar. Are there any plans to be able to add specific spell scrolls without having to homebrew them first? Yes, that is something that has been on the list for a long time. It's kind of hovered like a little bit down from the top, and then other priorities keep coming in over it, but it is something that we have wanted to do for a long time. It's something that we've got our eye on, And that is one of those rules gaps that I was talking about earlier that's on that list, and we're going to work through it as soon as we can. Aylwin, why do you think the game lacks unique magic weapons example? Unique magic weapon. Okay, excellent. All right. So I think I'm back. So ultimately, this is conjecture on my part about the why those weapon types don't exist, but I think it's that certain weapon types just don't have historical significance in the game. So, for instance, it is very, very easy for me if someone asks me what a magic longbow is, I'm going to say, oh, there's an oath bow, because that's something that's been a part of Dungeons and Dragons for decades. I am going to be very hard pressed if I can name any crossbows. I mean, I've seen in the arms and equipment guide in third edition, they had some magical crossbows that loaded bolts for you and that kind of thing. But there aren't very many, kind of almost named type of weapons. It's the same thing, throughout the history of the game, but also the history of just fantasy literature and everything else. Long swords, or what D&D calls long swords, are they predominate everything. Like so Excalibur is something that you're going to know about. A Vorpal sword is what you're going to know about, and you're maybe not going to have that many named halberds that are going to pop up in the consciousness of the game. And so I think that that would probably be what I would guess is the reason that we don't see a lot of those weapon types represented in the Dungeon Master's Guide and other types of supplements. But I think that those weapons and items give us enough of a template for the homebrew tinkerer to be able to take those concepts and ideas and make that apply. So in the campaign that really started D&D Beyond in the original days, Dave Hartless, who is our technical lead, he's joined me on the dev update once before. We're going to get him back here in the. All right, I think I'm back. Okay, I think I'm back. So, yeah. All right, everything's good. Okay, I am back, and there we go, just to make sure. Okay, so I don't know if you heard that one, but ultimately, with crossbows, for instance, I created a pair of hand crossbows for that character very, very specifically, using a lot of the take that I saw on other weapons. So I think that even though they don't exist, we have enough of the building blocks of those other weapons out there to ultimately end up with something that we can tinker into the other weapon types. So we'll have time for one more. So Saber Runner, buying the cosmetic upgrades for the character sheet after the product is released. That is something we're talking about, and something that allowing for the digital dice marketplace to exist is a step in that direction. As soon as we're ready to share more details about how you can snag those other cosmetic, display things on your character sheet, we will share more on it. Thank you for being with me today and enduring. Let's all give a hand to the internet out there. I mean, a global pandemic and everything that's going on, the internet is really, really pulling through. And sometimes it struggles, but it really is an incredible thing that we have at our fingertips in the modern world here. So thank you, internet, very much. Sorry for some of the issues. Thank you for joining me. We will not have a dev update next week because I'm taking a little bit of vacation into the Independence Day weekend. And so I will see you the following Thursday after that. Hope everybody has a great couple of weeks, and later, Gators.